Thursday afternoon, July 11th, 1963, 2:30 p.m., Bumpy Johnson's office above Smalls Paradise Nightclub, Harlem, New York. Frank Lucas, 33 years old, walks through the door expecting a routine meeting. What he finds instead is Bumpy sitting behind his desk with a ledger open, three other lieutenants standing against the wall, and an atmosphere so tense you could cut it with a knife. Bumpy looks up. His face shows something Frank has rarely seen in 7 years working for him: genuine anger. "Frank, sit down." Frank sits. His stomach already knows this is bad. Bumpy slides the ledger across the desk. "Your cousin Ray, you know him?" "Yes, Bump. He's running numbers on 145th Street. Was running numbers, past tense." Bumpy taps the ledger. "He's been skimming. 2 weeks, $14,000 total. Every penny documented right here." The room spins. Frank vouched for Ray personally 6 months ago when Ray came up from North Carolina looking for work. Frank promised Bumpy that Ray was trustworthy, that family meant something, that he'd stake his own reputation on his cousin. And now Ray has stolen $14,000 from Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy stands, walks to the window overlooking 135th Street. Without turning around, he says the words that will define the next 48 hours of Frank's life. "Street rules are clear, Frank. Man steals, he pays. Family steals, family handles it. You brought him in, you take him out. 48 hours. Frank feels the weight of what's being asked. No, not asked, ordered. Kill your own cousin. Prove where your loyalty lies. Choose business over blood. Bumpy turns around, opens his desk drawer, pulls out a gun, places it on the desk in front of Frank. "Don't make me regret trusting you." But here's what Frank Lucas understood in that moment that most men wouldn't. Bumpy Johnson didn't give orders just to watch people follow them. He gave orders to see how people thought. And Frank had 48 hours to prove he wasn't just another soldier who pulled triggers. He had 48 hours to show he was the smartest man in the room. What Frank did next didn't just save his cousin's life. It saved his own future. And the way he did it made Bumpy Johnson laugh so hard he had to call 3 other bosses just to tell them the story. This is about the day Frank Lucas showed everyone why Bumpy Johnson chose him as his heir. Not because he followed orders, but because he was smart enough to find better ones. To understand what happened that week in July 1963, you need to understand who Frank Lucas was and what this order really meant. Frank was 33 years old, been with Bumpy since 1956. 7 years. Started as Bumpy's driver, now one of his top lieutenants. He'd earned that position through intelligence, loyalty, and strategic thinking. Bumpy was teaching Frank everything, not just how to run operations, but how to think, how to see 3 moves ahead, how to turn problems into opportunities. Frank's cousin Ray was 25, came to Harlem from North Carolina 6 months earlier. Ray grew up poor, wanted better, and Frank was his ticket. Frank got him a job in the organization as a low-level numbers runner. Simple work: collect money from betting spots, bring it back to headquarters, get paid a percentage. Honest work, as honest as that work gets. But Ray got greedy. Over 2 weeks, he started skimming. 100 here, 200 there. Small enough that he thought nobody would notice. Big enough that over 2 weeks it added up to $14,000. In 1963, that was serious money, equivalent to about $140,000 today. What Ray didn't understand was that Bumpy Johnson's bookkeeping was perfect. Every penny was tracked. Every discrepancy was investigated. Bumpy had accountants who cross-referenced collector reports against actual collections. When money disappeared only from Ray's routes, the pattern was clear. Ray thought he was smart, but he was stealing from someone who'd been playing this game for 30 years. Here's why this mattered beyond just the money. Ray violated trust, and Frank had vouched for him personally, told Bumpy, "He's family, he's solid, I guarantee him." In Bumpy's world, when you guarantee someone and they fail, you fail. You either didn't know them well enough, which makes you stupid, or you knew and lied, which makes you complicit. Either way, it's a death sentence. The street rules were absolute. When someone steals from the organization, they die. When family steals, the family must handle it. It's a test. It asks, what do you value more? your blood or your business. And in Bumpy's world, business was supposed to be the answer. Business is family. The organization is your real family. Blood relatives are accidents of birth. This was the test every rising member eventually faced. Some version of choose us or choose them. Most people failed. They either killed their relative and broke themselves psychologically, or they refused and got killed along with the relative. There was no third option, except Frank Lucas was about to prove there was. Most men in Frank's position would have picked up that gun and done what they were told. That's why most men stayed small. But Frank wasn't most men. He'd watched Bumpy for 7 years. He'd studied how Bumpy thought, and he understood something crucial. Bumpy's test wasn't really about killing. It was about problem solving. Bumpy wanted his money back. He wanted respect maintained. He wanted to know Frank was loyal. But did he actually need Ray dead, or did he need the problem solved? Frank had 48 hours to find out. Let's go back to that Thursday afternoon at 2:30 p.m. when Frank walked into Bumpy's office. The summons had been urgent. Get to the office now. Frank had been on 125th Street checking on a restaurant when the call came. He drove straight there, thinking it was routine business. Maybe a new territory opening up. Maybe a problem with suppliers. He walked into the office and immediately knew it wasn't routine. 3 other lieutenants, Junie Bird, Red Davis, and Jimmy Brown, stood against the wall, silent, serious, witnesses to whatever was about to happen. Bumpy sat behind his desk with the ledger open in front of him. Not his regular business ledger, the enforcement ledger, the one that tracked problems. Frank, sit down. Frank sat in the chair across from the desk, the same chair where he'd sat hundreds of times over 7 years, learning the business, getting assignments, earning trust. You know your cousin Ray? Frank's stomach dropped. Yes, Bump. He's running numbers on 145th Street. Was running numbers, past tense. Bumpy slid the ledger across the desk. Frank looked down at 2 weeks of collection reports. Ray's routes were highlighted. Next to each date was a discrepancy. Every day for 2 weeks, the collections from Ray's spots were short. Sometimes $500, sometimes $200. Added up $14,000. Your cousin has been stealing from me, Frank. From us. For 2 weeks. Frank felt sick. Not just because Ray stole, but because Frank had vouched for him. 6 months ago, when Ray came up from North Carolina, Frank had gone to Bumpy personally. Give him a chance, Bump. He's my cousin. He's solid. I know him. And Bumpy had trusted Frank's judgment, had given Ray work based on Frank's guarantee. Now that guarantee was exposed as worthless. Bump, I didn't know he... Bumpy raised a hand. Of course you didn't know. If you knew, you would have stopped it. Question is, what do you know now? Frank understood the question. Do you know what has to happen next? Do you understand the rules? Will you follow them? I know the rules, Frank said quietly. Bumpy stood, walked to the window, looked down at 135th Street. Street rules are clear, Frank. Man steals, he pays. But when family steals, he turned around. Family has to handle it. You brought him in. You vouched for him. You made him part of this organization. Now you clean up your mess. The 3 lieutenants against the wall shifted slightly. Everyone knew what this meant. Everyone had heard stories of this test. Most people failed. 48 hours, Frank. Bumpy opened his desk drawer, pulled out a .38 special, placed it on the desk. Don't make me regret trusting you. Frank stared at the gun for 5 seconds. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Where is he now? Your apartment. 3 of my men are watching him. He knows he's caught. Doesn't know you're coming. Doesn't know the sentence yet. Frank picked up the gun, felt its weight. Cold, final, a tool for ending problems. I'll handle it, Bump. I know you will. That's why you're here. That's why you're different from everyone else. Frank walked out of that office with the gun in his jacket pocket and 48 hours to do something nobody thought he could do. Save both his cousin's life and his own career. The other 3 lieutenants watched him leave. After the door closed, Junie Bird said to Bumpy, Think he'll do it? Bumpy sat back down at his desk. I think Frank will handle the problem. Whether that means killing Ray or not, we'll see. That's what makes Frank interesting. Before we get into how Frank solved this, hit that subscribe button. This story is about intelligence, strategy, and creative problem solving in impossible situations. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know where in the world people are learning these stories of strategic thinking. Thursday, 4:01 p.m. Frank pulled up to his apartment building on 147th Street. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. Frank didn't fear much, but from the weight of what he had to do. He walked up to his second-floor apartment, knocked. One of Bumpy's guards, a man named Cecil, opened the door. "Frank, Bump sent me." Cecil nodded. Inside, two other guards sat in Frank's living room, and on the couch, hands tied, sat Ray Lucas. 25 years old, terrified, crying. "Frank," Ray started. "Shut up." Frank looked at the three guards. "Leave us alone for 20 minutes. The guards looked at each other. Cecil said, "Bump said to watch him." "You can watch from the hallway. I need to talk to my cousin. Privately." They left. Frank closed the door, sat down across from Ray. The silence lasted 10 seconds. Then Frank spoke. "How much did you take?" "Frank, I can explain." "How much?" $14,000 over 2 weeks. But I was going to pay it back, I swear." Frank laughed, not from humor, from disbelief. "You were going to pay back $14,000 on a numbers runner's salary? You make $200 a week, Ray. You'd need a year and a half. Did you think Bumpy wouldn't notice for a year and a half?" Ray was crying now. "I'm sorry, I got in debt, gambling. I needed money fast. You thought you could steal from Bumpy Johnson and get away with it." Frank leaned forward. "Do you know what you did to me? I vouched for you, told Bumpy you were trustworthy, made myself look like a fool or like I was in on it with you. Are you going to kill me?" Frank didn't answer. He stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured himself a drink, stood there for 5 minutes just thinking. Here's what was going through Frank's mind. The obvious solution was to follow orders. Take Ray somewhere quiet, put a bullet in his head, come back to Bumpy with proof of loyalty. That's what everyone expected. That's what the rules demanded. But Frank had learned something from Bumpy over 7 years. The rules were guidelines, not scripture. Bumpy respected people who achieved objectives, not people who blindly followed orders. The objective here wasn't kill Ray. The objective was restore respect, get the money back, prove loyalty, maintain order. What if Frank could achieve all those objectives without killing anyone? He came back to the living room, sent Ray to the bedroom with one guard, then sat alone thinking. Ray had assets, not much, but some. A 1959 Chevrolet Impala he'd bought 6 months ago, worth about $2,000. Some jewelry, gold chain, ring, watch, maybe $1,500. Savings account, probably $3,000 if he hadn't spent it all. And Ray had family. Their aunt back in North Carolina, Ray's mother, Frank's mother's sister, owned land. Farmland. 40 acres that had been in the family for 2 generations. That land was worth money, maybe $8,000. Frank did the math. Car, $2,000, plus jewelry, $500, plus savings, $3,000, plus land, $8,000, of $1,400. More than Ray stole. What if Frank could return more money than Ray took? What if he could turn this from a loss into a profit for Bumpy? And what if, on top of that, he could offer Ray's free labor for years to come? By Thursday evening, Frank had a plan. It was brilliant or it was suicide. Depending on how Bumpy received it, he called his aunt in North Carolina. "Aunt Rose, it's Frank. I need to talk to you about Ray." "Is he okay?" "He's in trouble, big trouble. He owes some dangerous people $14,000. If he doesn't pay by tomorrow, something very bad is going to happen to him." His aunt gasped. "14,000? How did he?" "Doesn't matter how. What matters is, can you help? You still have that 40 acres Grandpa left you?" "Yes, but I need you to sell it. Tomorrow. There's a man I know who'll buy it for $8,000 cash. Ray will pay you back every penny, I promise. But right now, this is life or death." There was silence. Then, "If it saves Ray's life, sell the land. Do what you need to do." Frank made 3 more calls. By midnight Thursday, He had it arranged. The land would sell for $8,000. Ray's car would be sold for $2,000. The jewelry would be liquidated for $1,500. Ray's savings, $3,000, would be emptied. Total, $1,485. $500 more than Ray stole. Now came the hard part. Convincing Bumpy this was better than a bullet. We're halfway through this story. If you're seeing how Frank turned an impossible situation into a win for everyone, leave a comment. What would you have done in Frank's position? Followed orders or found a different way? Let me know. Friday, July 12, 1963, 10 a.m. Frank walked into Bumpy's office carrying a briefcase and followed by Ray, who looked like he was walking to his execution, which as far as Ray knew, he was. Bumpy sat behind his desk, looked up, surprised. "Thought you'd come alone, Frank." "I got a different solution, Bump. Need to show you something." Bumpy leaned back in his chair. The three lieutenants from yesterday were back against the wall. Witnesses again. Everyone expected to hear that Ray was dead, and Frank had proof. Instead, Frank opened the briefcase. Stacks of cash. He placed them on Bumpy's desk. "That's $14,500. What Ray stole, plus 500 extra." The room went silent. Bumpy stared at the money, then at Frank, then at Ray, who was shaking. "Where'd this come from?" "Sold Ray's car yesterday, $2,000. Sold his jewelry, $500. Emptied his savings account, $3,000. Called his mother in North Carolina. Sold 40 acres of family land, $8,000. Every asset Ray had, liquidated." Bumpy picked up a stack, counted it. Real money, all there. "So you got my money back. That's good, Frank. But what about the disrespect? What about the message? What happens next time someone steals and thinks they can just pay it back?" This was the critical moment. Frank had prepared for this. "But that's not the best part, Bump." Bumpy raised an eyebrow. "There's a better part?" "Ray now owes his own mother $8,000 for that land. He's got no car, no savings, no assets of any kind. He's broke. And here's what I'm offering. Ray works for you for free for the next 2 years. No salary, just food and housing. That's 104 weeks of work. Based on what we pay runners, that's about $20,000 worth of labor." Frank let that sink in. "You're not just getting your $14,000 back, Bump. You're getting $14,500 in cash right now, plus $20,000 in free labor over 2 years. You're up $6,500 on this deal. And Ray learns that stealing doesn't get you killed. It makes you a slave for 2 years." The silence in the room was absolute. The three lieutenants stared. Ray looked like he might pass out. And Bumpy stared at Frank for 10 seconds. Then he started laughing. Not angry laughing. Genuine, delighted laughter. He laughed so hard he had to put his hand on his desk to steady himself. "Frank, you clever son of a bitch." He picked up the phone. Dialed. "Tommy, it's Bump. You got a minute? I need to tell you something." "No, everyone's fine. Better than fine. Frank just..." You won't believe what Frank just did. For the next 5 minutes, Bumpy told the story to Tommy Lucchese on the phone, laughing through the whole thing. "I told him to kill his cousin. He turned him into profit, $6,500 profit, plus 2 years free labor." When he hung up, Bumpy looked at Frank with something Frank had never quite seen before. Pure respect. "Frank, sit down." Frank sat. Ray stood, frozen. "Most guys would have just pulled the trigger, done what I said, proven they could follow orders. You know what that proves? That proves you can kill someone. Everyone can kill someone. That's not special." Bumpy counted the money again. $14,500, plus 2 years labor. "You didn't just solve the problem, Frank. You made it profitable. You turned a loss into a gain. That's intelligence. That's why you're different." He looked at Ray. You're going to Miami. We got operations there. Different supervisor. You work for free for 2 years. Every penny you earn goes to us. After 2 years, we're even. You understand?" Ray nodded, unable to speak. "You understand how lucky you are? Frank saved your life. He saved it by making you worth more alive than dead. You owe him everything. Now get out." Two guards escorted Ray out. He'd be on a bus to Miami by that afternoon. Bumpy and Frank sat alone. You know why I'm not mad you disobeyed my order? Why, Bump? Because you achieved the objective better than the order would have. I wanted respect maintained. Check. I wanted my money back. Check, plus interest. I wanted loyalty proven. Check. You just turned your cousin into an asset instead of a liability. And I wanted to know if you could think for yourself. Check. Bumpy stood, walked to his window. Remember this, Frank. I don't want mindless soldiers. I got plenty of guys who'll pull a trigger. What I need are problem solvers. People who see solutions I don't see. You just proved you're the best I've got. He turned around. Next time I give you an impossible order, find me the impossible solution. That's your job now. Not to do what I say, to achieve what I want in the smartest way possible. Frank walked out of that office understanding something most people never learn. The best followers don't follow blindly. They follow intelligently. They achieve objectives creatively. They make their leaders look smarter than they are by finding solutions the leader didn't think of. And that's why, 5 years later, when Bumpy Johnson died, Frank Lucas was the natural choice to take over. Not because he was the toughest, because he was the smartest. Within 24 hours, everyone in Bumpy's organization knew the story. Frank Lucas was ordered to kill his cousin. Instead, he turned the hit into a $6,500 profit. The story spread like wildfire. Other lieutenants realized why Frank was special. He wasn't just loyal, he was smart, he was creative. He found third options when everyone else saw only two choices. 2 weeks later, Frank got a letter from Miami. Ray writing to thank him. Frank, I know what you did. I know you could have killed me, and nobody would have blamed you. Instead, you saved my life and gave me a chance to make this right. I'm working hard down here, staying clean, learning the business the right way. I'll never forget what you did. I owe you everything. Ray worked in Miami for exactly 2 years. And here's what's interesting. He was good at it. Really good. Turned out that having his life saved gave him perspective. He became one of the top earners in the Miami operation. After his 2 years were up, Bumpy released him from obligation. Ray chose to stay in Miami, eventually went legitimate, opened a car dealership in 1967, did well, lived another 40 years, died in 2003, a successful businessman with a family who never knew how close he'd come to dying in 1963. All because Frank Lucas was smart enough to see that killing isn't always the answer. Frank's reputation in the organization elevated permanently. Other bosses heard the story. Bumpy's got the smart one, they said. Frank became known throughout New York's criminal network as the guy who thought his way through problems. People tried to recruit him, offered more money, more territory. But Frank stayed loyal to Bumpy because Bumpy was the one who taught him to think, who rewarded intelligence over obedience, who created space for creative solutions. Bumpy used the story as a teaching example throughout the organization. See what Frank did? That's thinking. Don't just do what I say. Do what I would do if I was smarter than I am. It created a culture. Bumpy's organization became known for problem solving, not just muscle. People wanted to work there because they were allowed to think. Other organizations were filled with fearful soldiers. Bumpy's was filled with strategic operators. And Frank Lucas was the example everyone pointed to. The story of Frank and his cousin became one of the defining moments in Frank Lucas's rise to power. When Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, Frank was the natural successor. Not the toughest guy in the organization. Not the most ruthless, the smartest. The one who'd proven over and over that he could think his way through impossible situations. Frank ran the organization the same way Bumpy had taught him, rewarding intelligence, punishing stupidity, always looking for solutions that maximized profit and minimized unnecessary violence. He built an empire that lasted years, and every time someone in his organization faced an impossible choice, Frank would tell them the story of his cousin Ray. Bumpy told me to kill my own cousin. I could have done it, would have proven I was loyal, but I found a better way. Turned a problem into profit, saved a life and earned respect. That's what I want from you. Not blind obedience, smart solutions. Ray Lucas lived the rest of his life knowing he'd been given a second chance. He stayed close to Frank until Frank's arrest in 1975. Testified as a character witness, said Frank had saved his life. The judge didn't care, but Ray never stopped trying to repay the debt. This story reveals something fundamental about Bumpy Johnson's leadership style. He gave orders knowing they might be modified. He tested people's creativity, not just their obedience. He created an organization where thinking was rewarded more than fear. Most bosses want fearful obedience. Bumpy wanted intelligent problem solving. That's why his organization was different. That's why people like Frank Lucas rose to the top. The lesson isn't about saving lives or refusing to kill. The lesson is about understanding what your leader actually wants versus what they say they want. Bumpy said, "Kill your cousin." What he meant was solve this problem in a way that proves you're worthy of leading this organization someday. Frank understood the difference. Most people don't. That Thursday afternoon, Bumpy Johnson gave Frank Lucas a gun and an order to kill his own cousin. By Friday morning, Frank returned the gun unused, handed over more money than was stolen, and turned a potential loss into a profitable long-term arrangement. And Bumpy laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he'd finally found someone who understood him completely. Someone who knew that the best soldiers aren't the ones who follow orders best. They're the ones who achieve objectives creatively. Frank didn't just save his cousin that week, he saved his own future. He proved he was smart enough to be Bumpy Johnson's heir. And he did it by understanding that sometimes the best way to follow an order is to find a better one. That's not disobedience. That's genius. And that's why, decades later, we're still telling this story, because it teaches the most important lesson about leadership and intelligence. The goal isn't obedience. The goal is outcomes. And the people who find the best outcomes, even if they ignore the orders, are the ones who truly deserve to lead. Bumpy ordered Frank to kill his cousin. Frank turned the order into profit, and in doing so, he proved he was worthy of everything Bumpy would eventually give him. Now I want to hear from you. Did Frank make the right choice? Should he have just followed Bumpy's orders, or was his creative solution better? Drop your answer in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. This story about intelligence beating blind obedience has reached people everywhere. If this showed you why Frank Lucas became Bumpy's successor, hit subscribe. Next week, the time Bumpy Johnson turned a police ambush into a business opportunity. You don't want to miss it. Remember, Bumpy ordered Frank to kill his cousin. Frank turned the order into profit. That's not disobedience, that's genius.